Hello everyone, it's Paul back again for another Ace Combat 7 discussion video. So I've been playing a lot of the older Ace Combat games recently. Specifically, I've been playing a bit of Ace Combat 4, trying to get the last couple S ranks on Ace difficulty in some of the missions. And I've started to wonder exactly what the gameplay is going to feel like in Ace Combat 7. So Ace Combat has gotten popular for striking the balance between a super arcadey sort of game and a full-blown combat flight simulator. So, you have a lot more weapons and you don't have to worry about fuel or anything like that. And you also get to destroy a lot more targets than you would in a normal combat flight simulator. And it's honestly quite a bit easier, but it's also not quite as lame, I guess you could say, as just doing a side-scrolling aircraft game. Which I'm not trying to say those games are bad, they just are definitely not as deep as Ace Combat. So there are definitely some games in the franchise, though, that veer more towards one end of the spectrum or the other. So, like, for instance, Ace Combat Assault Horizon is known for being probably the most arcade-like version of Ace Combat that we've gotten recently, anyway, as opposed to Ace Combat 4, which I would rate as being the most realistic, with air quotes there, realistic being a relative term. Assault Horizon is, of course, a controversial game in the Ace Combat franchise, with some fans liking it, but with a lot of other fans of the series being very turned off by the gameplay, going way too arcadey. And what I mean by that is that Assault Horizon added much more of an on-rails experience to the franchise. So a lot of the dogfights that you experience are totally identical or near to it whenever you play the game. And some of the fights definitely look really cool, but a lot of them feel hollow to me, at least in my opinion, because they take away a lot of the player's agency in the game. Your ability to make decisions and attempt to personally control maneuvers was replaced by a series of abilities with warm-ups and cooldowns. So ultimately, I understand why some people like Assault Horizon, but I personally didn't enjoy it as much as the other games in the franchise. While I may be watching my aircraft do amazing things, my level of control over the experience is extremely limited, which ultimately removes the satisfaction for me. So Ace Combat 4, in my opinion, is on the other end of the spectrum. So while dogfighting mode in Ace Combat Assault Horizon essentially flies the plane for you, Ace Combat 4 is the least forgiving Ace Combat game. The fighters in the game handle kind of less magically is honestly the best way to describe the way some of the fighters handle in the other games. And they really forces the player to think out maneuvers before just attempting them and not facing any consequences. So the best example of this is low altitude maneuvering and really having to be aware of where the floor is during the mission. So in many of the newer games, even in Ace Combat 5, players can attempt really low altitude maneuvers very easily, and when you pull back on the stick, it really snaps the plane up with a remarkable responsiveness. Ace Combat 4 aircraft responds a little less promptly, except for in roll, which sometimes I feel like some of the aircraft in that game just roll ridiculously fast. But in terms of pitch, players operating at low levels really need to be careful not to crash. You really need to think out in advance what you're going to be doing when you're trying to pursue an enemy or going in low for a low-level attack. Similarly, engaging enemy fighters tended to be a bit more thought out, as your aircraft didn't always turn on a dime, and stalls seem more frequent to me in Ace Combat 4 than in other games. You really had to watch your speed and think about conserving your energy. So some people don't like this, as it means it's easier to get stuck in difficult situations that are harder to get out of. But I personally did like it because it encouraged the player to think ahead about what they wanted to do and where they needed to go to do it. And it really added a consequence in the form of crashing to poorly thought out flight maneuvers. So some players might complain that deaths from crashes are annoying, but I'd like to point out that the game is not just a combat game, but also a flight simulator. So the challenge should not just come from enemy aircraft and ground forces, but also come in the form of handling your aircraft. If you're not aware of what your plane is doing, if you let the aircraft get ahead of you, you should get yourself into trouble as a result of that. So this leads us into kind of the main point of the video, which is how Ace Combat 7 will handle its gameplay. So thankfully we have a couple hints as to what we should expect to see, but all of this is still somewhat speculative. So we know from some of the interviews with developers that the game will not behave like Ace Combat Assault Horizon, but instead will behave more like 4 and 5. Whether it will be more like 4 or more like 5, so far it's hard to say. We know the games are similar, but again, for some of the reasons I just mentioned, they do set themselves apart. We have seen gameplay now from Ace Combat 7 from a demo that was set up at a convention, but it's very limited, it's very low quality footage, and this may or may not change between now and the final game in terms of how the aircraft are going to behave. I will say that I liked the demo that was shown. It looked like to me the aircraft were more responsive than in Ace Combat 4. Honestly, that's fine. As long as we don't have, again, this is just my preferences, but as long as it doesn't go full-blown Assault Horizon where it's quick-time events, basically, that you're playing through, I'm happy with it as long as we get to maintain control of the aircraft and make our own decisions. So I've gone ahead and I've linked to that video, both in the cards on this video and in the description. But keep in mind, this is very low quality footage. It's basically a screen recorded by a camera, so it's not great, but it's the best we have, unfortunately. I didn't want to make a full video breaking down that footage, again, because it's a demo, so it's hard to say exactly what we can infer from it. But we do see some cool stuff, like we can see how information will be displayed to the player when using a VR headset. And the high detail cockpit of this F-18 looks really great. We can actually see the stick moving around in the cockpit, responding to what the player's actually doing on his controller, which is fantastic. I think I'm really going to love... I personally want to try and get a VR setup for this game, and then also get some flight controls that will be compatible with the PlayStation 4 just to play this. I think that would be really fantastic and immersive. So beyond what we can see, though, in this mission, it's hard to infer things that might be a characteristic of this real game. We see that the plane starts the mission with only about 46 or 48 missiles, and his gun is unlimited, and this usually varies with difficulty level in Ace Combat games. But even so, it may, again, only be representative of this demo. In the actual game, we might not have any idea of the amount of ammo you get in a normal mission, or, you know, how much bullets you get, if what difficulty levels you'll have unlimited bullets. I, again, like to tend to go towards more of the higher difficulties where you have more limited weapons. I just find the challenge to be more interesting, but, you know, everyone has their own preferences. Because of these uncertainties, though, in terms of whether this is all just for the demo or whether it's going to be in the final game, that's why I just decided to simply talk about the different types of gameplay we've seen in the past rather than try and break down this demo that may not be a good representation. But I'm personally glad that we are able to confirm that Ace Combat 7 does not feature the dogfight mode. I'm glad that we are putting that control back into the hands of the player. I'm really looking forward to playing this game, trying to, hopefully the PlayStation VR will come back in stock for a reasonable price in the months before the game comes out, but we'll see. Thank you everybody for watching the video, and leave a comment down below about what style of gameplay you prefer in your air combat games and why. So thanks for watching, and have a nice day.